Indira Gandhi Quotes. My grandfather once told me that there were two kinds of people: those who do the work and those who take the credit. He told me to try to be in the first group. There was much less competition. Opportunities are not offered. They must be wrested and worked for. And this calls for perseverance and courage. To be liberated, woman must feel free to be herself, not in rivalry to man but in the context of her own capacity and her personality. I am proud that I spent the whole of my life in the service of my people. I shall continue to serve until my last breath, and when I die, I can say that every drop of my blood will invigorate India and strengthen it. Every new experience brings its own maturity and a greater clarity of vision. People tend to forget their duties but remember their rights. The purpose of life is to believe, to hope, and to strive. Without courage, you cannot practice any other virtue. You have to have courage of different kinds. First, intellectual courage, to sort out different values and make up your mind about which is the one which is right for you to follow. You have to have moral courage to stick up to that, no matter what comes in your way, no matter what the obstacle and the opposition is. Women sometimes go too far, it's true. But it's only when you go too far that others listen. To become capable, one must have faith in oneself. Never forget that when we are silent, we are one. And when we speak, we are two. Whenever you take a step forward, you are bound to disturb something. Forgiveness is a virtue of the brave. Life is a continuous process of adjustment. That's always been my philosophy. I've never thought of the consequences of a necessary action. Mankind will endure when the world appreciates the logic of diversity. Have you ever climbed a mountain? You see, once you arrive at the top of a mountain, you think you've reached the highest point. But it's only an impression that doesn't last long. People with clenched fists cannot shake hands. I don't mind if my life goes in the service of the nation. If I die, every drop of my blood will invigorate the nation. Nothing that is worthwhile is ever easy. A nation's strength ultimately consists in what it can do on its own, and not in what it can borrow from others. Let's not forget that in India the symbol of strength is a woman, the goddess Shakti. Popularity is not a guarantee of quality. The greatest of all contraceptives is affluence. I was a perfect housewife. Being a mother has always been the job I liked best. Absolutely. What is popular need not necessarily be right or wise. When I was young, I was very selfish, now not anymore. Not only Negroes and Jews, but also women are part of a great revolt of which one can only approve. Rebels and nonconformists are often the pioneers and designers of change. The power to question is the basis of all human progress. I think one should do what seems right. And if what seems right involves danger, well, one must risk the danger. Just when you think you've achieved something, you realize you've achieved nothing. And still you have to go forward just the same, toward a dream so distant that your road has neither beginning nor end. As I always say, I do not wish you an easy time, but I wish you that whatever difficulty you may have, you will overcome it. Difficulties can't be eliminated from life. Individuals will always have them. Countries will always have them. The only thing is to accept them. If possible, overcome them. Otherwise, to come to terms with them. It's all right to fight. Yes. But only when it's possible. You soon realize that the peak you've climbed was one of the lowest. That the mountain was part of a chain of mountains. That there are still so many mountains to climb. And the more you climb, the more you want to climb, even though you're dead tired. I've never understood women who, because of their children, pose as victims and don't allow themselves any other activities. We always said that our struggle was not only against the British as representatives of colonialism. It was against all the evil that existed in India. The evil of the feudal system. The evil of the system based on caste. The evil of economic injustice. There exists no politician in India daring enough to attempt to explain to the masses that cows can be eaten. You must learn to be still in the midst of activity and to be vibrantly alive in repose. I fall in love with anything I do and I always try to do it well. The immediate is often the enemy of the ultimate. There are only moments of happiness, from contentment to ecstasy. I cannot understand how anyone can be an Indian and not be proud. Ability is not always gauged by examination. Even if I died in the service of the nation, I would be proud of it. Every drop of my blood will contribute to the growth of this nation and to make it strong and dynamic. Education is a liberating force. And in our age it is also a democratizing force, cutting across the barriers of caste and class, smoothing out inequalities imposed by birth and other circumstances. Sometimes friends are dangerous. We must be very careful about the help friends give us. The future doesn't frighten me, even if it threatens to be full of other difficulties. To be a mother, a housewife, never cost me any sacrifice. I savored every minute of those years. It is our duty to create a social milieu in which the young and the socially weak feel that the present and future belong to them. Without peace there can be no prosperity for any people, rich or poor. And yet, there can be no peace without erasing the harshness of the growing contrast between the rich and the poor. The civil servant is primarily the master of the short-term solution. The fact that I have an ideology, however, doesn't mean I'm indoctrinated. Sometimes we hurt one another without realizing it. The longer one doesn't write, the more difficult it is to communicate. In all communities you find groups that behave badly. But you must understand them too. In the Western world, women have no other choice. In India, no. And I'll explain the reason. It's a reason that also has to do with my own case. In India, women have never been a hostile competition with men, even in the most distant past. Every time a woman emerged as a leader, perhaps as a queen, the people accepted her as something normal and not exceptional. The old need the company of the young so that they renew their contact with life. To bear many children is considered not only a religious blessing but also an investment. The greater their number, some Indians reason, the more alms they can beg. How can anybody who is the head of a nation afford not to be a pragmatist? One must beware of ministers who can do nothing without money, and those who want to do everything with money. The meek may one day inherit the earth, but not the headlines. I have certain objectives. They're the same objectives my father had: to give people a higher standard of living, to do away with the cancer of poverty, to eliminate the consequences of economic backwardness. In today's world, no country can be absolutely independent of another. It is a world of interdependence. To me, the function of politics is to make possible the desirable. You cannot shake hands with a clenched fist. We would rather starve than sell our national honor. There is not love where there is no will. My theory is that men are no more liberated than women. The sterilization of men is one method of birth control. The surest, most radical method. To you it seems dreadful. To me it seems that, properly applied, it's by no means dreadful. I don't see the world as something divided between right and left. It depends on what you mean by the word religion. Certainly I don't go to temples and pray to the gods or anything like that. It is legitimate to have one's own point of view and political philosophy. But there are people who make anger, rather than a deeply held belief, the basis of their actions. They do not seem to mind harming society as a whole in the pursuit of their immediate objective. No society can survive if it yields to the demands of frenzy, whether of the few or the many. Life is always full of dangers, and I don't think one should avoid dangers. As a nation, I believe we've acquired faith in ourselves. Every democratic system evolves its own conventions. It is not only the water but the banks which make the river. It's the same story as when we nationalized the banks. I'm not for nationalization because of the rhetoric of nationalization, or because I see in nationalization the cure-all for every injustice. I'm for nationalization in cases where it's necessary. I'm trained to difficulties. Difficulties can't be eliminated from life. Forgiveness is the virtue of brave. I learned very soon to get along by myself. I went back into politics only when it was clear that things weren't going as they should have in my party. I was always arguing. I argued with everyone, with my father, with the leaders I had known since I was a child. And one day, it was in 1955, one of them exclaimed, "You do nothing but criticize. If you think you can correct things, correct them. Go ahead. Why don't you try?" Well, I could never resist a challenge, so I tried. I refuse to indulge in small talk and compliments, if at all. I save for after the job is done. Now I don't get upset by unpleasant things. I don't play the victim. And I'm always ready to come to terms with life. Defeats are always pitiful. Victories are always last resources. Martyrdom does not end something, it only a beginning. My father was a saint. I'm not. Until the day she died. My mother continued to fight for the rights of women. She joined all the women's movements of the time. She stirred up a lot of revolts. She was a great woman. A great figure. Women today would like her immensely. For me, the only point that has remained unchanged through the years is that in India there is still so much poverty. In any case, I married Feroz Gandhi. Once I get an idea in my head, no one in the world can make me change my mind. You don't help a country by supporting a military regime that denies any sign of democracy. And what defeated Pakistan was its military regime. Happiness is such a fleeting point of view. There's no such thing as continual happiness. If I die a violent death, as some fear and a few are plotting, I know that the violence will be in the thought and the action of the assassins, not in my dying. We must protect families. We must protect children, who have inalienable rights and should be loved, should be taken care of physically and mentally, and should not be brought into the world only to suffer.